By the time Officer Cole Hartman ordered the pregnant woman to sit down on the hot pavement, 14 guests outside the Ardmore Hotel had their phones out and pointed at him. He was certain of three things. The black sedan in the valet lane was stolen. The woman in the loose gray dress did not belong in a driveway like this one. And the badge on his chest made him right. He was wrong about all three. What he did not know, what the crowd filming him did not know, was that the quiet woman he had just handcuffed for auto theft, 7 months pregnant, asking only for somewhere to sit, spent her working days investigating police departments for the United States Department of Justice. A letter with her signature was already sitting on his chief's desk. By the end of that afternoon, the officer so sure of his authority would lose his badge, his pension, and his freedom, and his entire department would sign away its independence to the federal government. He had 4 minutes left as the man he believed himself to be. The road to that exact moment had begun 3 hours earlier, with a phone call and a promise. Her name was Imani Booker, and that morning she had promised her husband she would rest. Daniel was 1,200 miles away at a teaching hospital in Denver, finishing a surgical fellowship that would not let him fly home until the baby came. So they did what they had done for months. They talked on the phone while she walked, while she ate, while she pretended the distance was smaller than it was. He had made her swear she would take it easy this weekend. She had laughed and promised, and she had mostly meant it. Imani was 34. She had a calm that people often mistook for shyness, and a memory that lawyers across 3 states had learned to fear. For 9 years, she had worked in the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department, in a small unit with a long name, the Special Litigation Section. Her job, stripped of its jargon, was simple and enormous. When a police department developed a habit of trampling the people it was sworn to protect, when the complaints piled up too heavy to ignore, her office opened what the law called a pattern or practice investigation. She read thousands of pages. She interviewed officers and victims. She built the case that forced change. That was exactly why she was in Missouri. The Brightwater Hills Police Department, just outside St. Louis, had collected a stack of citizen complaints tall enough to reach Washington. 2 weeks earlier, her section had opened a formal review. A letter announcing it, carrying her name near the bottom, had gone out to the chief, the county council, and the mayor. She had flown in quietly to begin the groundwork, the way she always did, before anyone in a uniform knew her face. She had rented the black sedan at the airport because her own car was a decade old, and she did not want to break down on a highway at 7 months pregnant. The car was nicer than anything she would have chosen for herself. She had signed for it without thinking twice. A small decision. It would nearly cost her everything. Here is something worth holding on to before we go further. Most people believe that if you are innocent, the law protects you automatically. That belief is comforting, and it is not quite true. The law protects you, but only if someone is willing to honor it in the moment it matters. Imani knew this better than almost anyone alive. She was about to learn it again, in her own body, on a sidewalk in the sun. That afternoon, she pulled into the curved entrance of the Ardmore, tired and hungry and ready to put her feet up. She eased the sedan to the curb, killed the engine, and sat for a moment with one hand on the swell of her belly, breathing through the dull ache in her lower back. Through the glass doors, she could see the cool lobby, the marble, the little cafe in the corner. She just had to get inside. She did not see the man at the valet stand watching her. His name was Gerald Pace, and he had decided something about her before she opened her door. A woman like that, he thought, in a car like that. He had read about a luxury car theft ring on a neighborhood forum the week before, and the story had lodged in him the way fear stories do, turning into a feeling that felt like knowledge. He called the non-emergency police line and reported a suspicious person, possibly a stolen vehicle, at the hotel entrance. He gave a description that was mostly the color of her skin. Officer Cole Hartman took the call. Hartman was 41, and he had been with Brightwater Hills for 16 years. In that time, 23 formal complaints had been filed against him for rough handling, for stops without cause, for a temper that ran hot when people did not do what he said when he said it. None of the complaints had stuck. A captain named Doyle, an old friend, had quietly smoothed more than one report into nothing. Hartman had come to understand the world in a particular way. The badge made him right, and the system would back him, and so the badge made him right. It was a circle he had stopped questioning a long time ago. He rolled into the entrance of the Ardmore with his lights off and parked at an angle behind the black sedan, boxing it in. Imani was just gathering her bag, one hand braced on the doorframe to lever herself up, when she saw him approach in her side mirror. Her stomach tightened, not from the baby, but from something older and more practical. She had read too many incident reports not to feel the temperature of a thing like this. She kept both hands visible and spoke first, calm and clear. "Good afternoon, officer. Is something wrong?" "Step away from the vehicle," Hartman said. He did not answer her question. He rarely answered questions. "This your car? It's a rental. The paperwork is in my bag, right here." "May I show you?" I said. "Step away from the vehicle." Imani moved away from the door slowly, hands where he could see them. She was aware of the heat radiating up from the concrete, of the sweat at her hairline, of the weight low in her body that made every movement deliberate. She was aware, too, of the people beginning to slow on the sidewalk, sensing a scene the way people do. "Officer, I'm happy to cooperate," she said. "My name is Imani Booker. I'm a guest at this hotel. The rental agreement is in my bag along with my identification. I'm also 7 months pregnant, and I'd like to sit down. There's a bench right there. May I sit while we sort this out?" "You can sit when I tell you to sit," Hartman said. There it was. The first violation she counted quietly, the way she had counted them in 1,000 transcripts. A detention with no reasonable suspicion of any crime. A man had called in her skin and her car, and that was not, under any law she had ever litigated, a lawful basis to hold her. She did not say this, saying it would not help. She filed it instead in the cold, clear part of her mind that never stopped working. "What's in the bag?" Hartman said. "My identification, the rental agreement, my phone, my prenatal vitamins. May I reach for the agreement?" "Don't move." Hartman keyed his radio and called in the plate. While he waited, he circled the sedan, looking through the windows like a man already certain of what he would find. Imani stood in the sun. A minute passed. 2. The ache in her back spread and sharpened. She shifted her weight and felt, low in her belly, the first faint tightening that was not the baby moving, a muscle drawing tight and then releasing. She knew what that was. Early contractions, the kind that come from heat and stress and standing too long. Nothing yet, but a warning. "Officer," she said, and now there was something steadier and more serious under the calm. "I need to sit down. I'm feeling lightheaded, and I'm having some tightening. This is a medical situation. Please." "You'll be fine," Hartman said, not looking at her. The radio crackled. The plate came back as a rental, registered to a national company. No flags, no theft report, nothing. Which should have ended it. A reasonable officer hears that and apologizes and clears the scene. Hartman heard it and felt only the small, hot insult of being wrong. And he did what he had always done with that feeling. He pushed it back onto the person in front of him. "Rentals get stolen all the time," he said. "Paperwork can be faked. Turn around." "Officer, please. I am asking you to let me sit. I am pregnant, and I am not feeling well. Turn around and put your hands behind your back." The crowd on the sidewalk had stopped pretending not to watch. Phones were up now, a dozen of them, little black rectangles catching the afternoon light. A young valet stood frozen with a set of keys in his hand. An older woman near the doors had a palm pressed to her mouth. Imani turned around. She did it slowly, both because of her body and because she understood, with the awful clarity of her profession, that everything now depended on what the cameras saw. She would not give him a struggle. She would give him the truth, recorded in full. "I am not resisting," she said, loud enough to carry. "I am telling you I am 7 months pregnant and in medical distress, and you are arresting me anyway. I want that on your body camera." "I am not resisting." Hartman pulled her wrists behind her back and clicked the cuffs on, and he ratcheted them 1 notch too tight, the way he did when someone had embarrassed him. The metal bit into her skin. She breathed through it. "You are under arrest for auto theft," he said. The plate came back clean. "You heard it come back clean. Sit down," he said, and he put a hand on her shoulder and pressed her toward the curb, toward the bare hot concrete, not the bench, the ground. "Sit." And here, for one moment, the whole street seemed to hold its breath. A pregnant woman, hands cuffed behind her, lowering herself with terrible care toward the pavement, because a man with a badge had told her to and would not hear anything else. Somewhere a phone was recording her face, and her face was not afraid. It was the stillness of a person who knows exactly what is happening and exactly what it will cost the man who is doing it. Then a second patrol car turned into the entrance, and a lieutenant named Frank Boyd stepped out. And everything began to come apart for Cole Hartman, though it would take him until the very end to understand it. Boyd was a 20-year man, gray at the temples, the kind of supervisor who showed up to scenes because experience had taught him that Hartman generated scenes. He took in the picture in front of him in a single sweep, the boxed-in rental, the crowd with their phones, the cuffs, and the woman on the curb, visibly pregnant, sweat on her face, saying clearly to no one and everyone that she was in medical distress and had not resisted. "Hartman," Boyd said low. "What is this? Stolen vehicle." Suspect was uncooperative. "The plate came back clean, Cole. Rentals get stolen." Boyd crouched in front of the woman on the curb, and that small human act, getting down to her level, was the first decent thing that had happened to her in 20 minutes. "Ma'am," he said. "I'm Lieutenant Boyd. Can you tell me your name?" "Imani Booker." Her voice was steady but thinner now. "I'm a guest here. The rental papers are in my bag. I'm 7 months pregnant, and I'm having contractions. I need to sit somewhere that isn't the ground, and I need water, and I need these cuffs loosened. I've asked for all 3. I've been refused." Something moved across Boyd's face. The name had caught on something in his memory. He stood up slowly. "Booker," he said. "You work for the Justice Department." The sidewalk went quiet in a new way. "I do," Imani said. "Special Litigation Section, Civil Rights Division. I'm one of the attorneys on the open investigation into this department. The notice letter went to your chief 2 weeks ago. My name is on it." Lieutenant Frank Boyd, 20 years on the job, felt the blood drain out of his face. He understood, in the space of a single breath, what was sitting handcuffed on the curb in front of 14 cameras. Not a car thief. A federal civil rights attorney, pregnant, in medical distress, arrested without cause by an officer with 23 complaints. In the exact jurisdiction her office was already investigating for this exact kind of conduct, with every second of it recorded on his department's own body cameras and on a dozen phones that would be online before sundown. "Get those cuffs off her," Boyd said. "Now." "Lieutenant." She was uncooperative, she now. "Hartman." The cuffs came off. Imani brought her hands around in front of her and rubbed her wrists, and Boyd was already on his radio, calling for an ambulance. A pregnant female in possible medical distress, expedite. Then he turned to Imani and crouched again. "Miss Booker, I am so sorry. Is there someone you need me to call?" She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "I'll make my own call, thank you. But I'd like you to stay on your body camera while I do." She took her phone from her bag with hands that trembled only a little, and she dialed a number she knew by heart. It rang once. The man who answered was named Theo Reyes, and he was the section chief of special litigation, her boss of 9 years. "Imani," he said warmly. "How's Missouri, Theo?" she said. And only now, with help arriving and the worst of it behind her, did her voice finally crack. "I need you to listen, because this is being recorded on a police body camera, and I want it clean. About 25 minutes ago, I was detained outside my hotel by a Brightwater Hills officer. No reasonable suspicion. A civilian called in the car and my race. The plate came back clean, and he arrested me anyway for auto theft. I told him I was pregnant and in distress and asked to sit and for water. He refused and ordered me onto the pavement in handcuffs. I'm all right. An ambulance is coming. But Theo, this happened to me in the exact department we're investigating, and it is all on camera. There was a silence on the line, not an empty silence, a gathering one. Say the officer's name, Theo said quietly. Officer Cole Hartman, badge 4471, and the supervisor on scene, Lieutenant Frank Boyd. For the record, Lieutenant Boyd arrived, recognized the situation, removed the cuffs, and called for medical aid. He's been appropriate. Good. Theo's voice had gone very flat and very calm, which anyone who knew him understood was the most dangerous register he had. Imani, listen to me. You are done working for today. Let the paramedics do their job. I am calling the United States Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of Missouri the second we hang up, and I am calling the chief of that department personally, and I promise you, the federal posture toward Brightwater Hills changed the instant that man put cuffs on you. Is the officer near enough to hear me? Imani looked at Hartman, who was standing a few feet away, his certainty just beginning to curdle into something else. She held the phone out toward him. He can hear you. Officer Hartman, Theo Reyes said, his voice carrying clearly across the suddenly silent entrance. My name is Theo Reyes. I am the section chief of the Special Litigation Section of the Civil Rights Division of the United States Department of Justice. The woman you arrested is one of my attorneys, and she is 7 months pregnant, and you ignored her when she told you she was in medical distress. You will not touch her again. You will not speak to her again except through counsel. And you should understand that everything you did in the last half hour, you did on camera during a federal investigation into your department to a federal attorney. I would tell you to get a lawyer, but I suspect your union will insist on that for you. Hartman's mouth opened. For the first time in 16 years, nothing came out. The ambulance arrived 2 minutes later. The paramedics checked Imani's blood pressure, which was high, and timed the contractions, which were irregular and slowing now that she was sitting in the shade with a bottle of water in her hands. Braxton Hicks, the lead paramedic, told her gently, brought on by heat and stress, not true labor, but they wanted to take her in to be sure. She agreed. As they helped her into the back of the rig, she looked at the crowd, at the dozen phones still recording, and she did not perform anything for them. She simply rested a hand on her belly and let them see a woman who had been right the whole time. She was wrong about only one thing. She had assumed that being right would feel like victory. It mostly felt like being tired. The baby was fine. A nurse confirmed the heartbeat within the hour, strong and fast and indifferent to everything its mother had just survived. Imani called Daniel from the hospital bed, and her husband, 1,200 miles away, wept in a stairwell between surgeries, half with rage and half with relief, and made her promise again to rest, and this time she did not laugh. What happened to Cole Hartman happened the way these things happen when the evidence cannot be buried, which is to say, slowly at first, and then all at once. The body camera footage could not be smoothed away by Captain Doyle because the Justice Department had requested it in writing before Doyle even reached his desk. The phone videos were online by that evening and seen by millions by the next, and they showed everything: the clean plate, The refused requests, the word pregnant spoken plainly and ignored, the cuffs, the curb. Internal Affairs opened a file it could not close. The federal investigation that had been moving at a careful, methodical pace suddenly had a face and a name and a video and the full attention of the United States Attorney. And then the others came forward. Because Imani's case was never really about Imani. It was about a pattern, and patterns have victims. And victims who had been ignored for years suddenly saw a reason to speak. A woman named Carla Whitfield, who had been thrown to the ground by Hartman during a traffic stop 2 years before and told no one would believe her. A retired schoolteacher named Eugene Tate, who had been detained for 90 minutes for the crime of jogging in his own neighborhood. A 19-year-old named Deshaun Ellis, who had a complaint sitting in a drawer that had quietly disappeared. 3 names, then a dozen, then more. They had all been told, in one way or another, that the system would protect the badge. They had all been right until the day it didn't. There was one more, and she surprised everyone. A young officer named Dana Marsh, 3 years on the force, who had been Hartman's occasional partner and had watched things she had told herself were not her business. Marsh requested a meeting with the federal investigators, and she came alone, without her union representative, and she told the truth about what she had seen and what she had been encouraged to leave out of reports. It cost her. The blue wall does not forgive. But when she was asked later why she did it, she said only that she had a daughter, and she had decided she wanted to be able to explain her job to her someday. Cole Hartman was charged under federal law, Title 18, Section 242, the deprivation of rights under color of law. The statute that exists for exactly the moment a person uses a badge to take from someone what the Constitution promised them. His attorney argued qualified immunity, the legal shield that so often protects officers from the consequences of their conduct. The court rejected it. The right of a person not to be arrested without cause, the right of a pregnant detainee not to be denied basic medical care, these were not murky or novel questions. They were clearly established. The shield did not apply. To the very end, in every interview and every hearing, Hartman insisted he had done nothing wrong. He had read the situation. He had followed his training. He knew what he was doing. He said it the way a man says a prayer he has stopped believing but cannot stop reciting. He lost his job, he lost his pension, and in time he lost his freedom. Captain Doyle, who had buried complaints for years, retired under investigation. The chief resigned. 11 months after a pregnant woman was ordered onto a hot sidewalk, the Brightwater Hills Police Department signed a consent decree with the United States Department of Justice. It is a long document full of dry language, and it is one of the most powerful things the law can do. The department agreed to independent federal oversight. It agreed to a ban on stops based on profiling, to real consequences for officers who violated it, to a civilian oversight board with actual power, to retraining, to tracking every use of force. A monitor would report to a federal judge for years. The settlement that accompanied it funded the reforms and the board. Imani did not argue the case herself. She was on maternity leave by then. But her name was on the first letter, and her name was on the decree. And somewhere in a federal building there is a recording of her voice on a curb, refusing to be afraid. That helped make all of it real. She did not feel like a hero. She had told Daniel, on one of those long phone calls during the months it took, that she kept waiting to feel triumphant, and instead just felt like she wanted the people of Brightwater Hills to be able to drive to a hotel without being made to prove they deserved to exist there. The baby came in the spring, a girl healthy and loud with her father's eyes. Daniel had finally come home by then, and he was in the room, and when the nurse placed the baby on Imani's chest, the room was very quiet and very full. Months later, a package arrived at their door with no return address. Inside was a single item, carefully wrapped, and a card with no signature. The item was a small framed copy of the opening line of the consent decree, the dry legal sentence that committed an entire police department to treating people as equals under the law. Imani never learned for certain who sent it. She suspected it was Lieutenant Boyd, the one man on that sidewalk who had chosen, in the moment it mattered, to honor the law instead of the badge. She set the frame on a shelf in the nursery, where her daughter would not be able to read it for years. When her daughter was old enough to ask about her work, Imani did not tell her the story as a story about a stolen car or a man in handcuffs at the end. She told her instead about the bench she had asked to sit on and the water she had asked for, and how sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is stay calm and tell the truth and trust that the truth, given enough light, can defend itself. She told her that her job was not to punish people. It was to make sure that what was promised to everyone actually reached everyone. And she told her that the law is only as strong as the people willing to honor it in the moment it cost them something. Dignity, Imani had learned on that sidewalk, is not weakness wearing good manners. It is power held under control. It is the woman who does not scream back, not because she is afraid, but because she has already decided that the man in front of her will not get to choose what kind of person she becomes. And justice, real justice, is not the satisfying noise of someone losing everything. It is the quieter thing that comes after. When the cameras are gone and the outrage has cooled, and a city full of strangers can finally walk into a building, any building certain that the law standing at the door belongs to them too. That afternoon, an officer thought he had caught a thief. Instead, he had stopped a woman whose entire life was the law, and in the silence that followed, an entire department finally heard what it had refused to hear for years. The promise, it turned out, had been theirs to keep all along. Before you go, tell me one thing in the comments. If you had been on that sidewalk with your phone, would you have kept recording, or would you have looked away? And where are you watching from? Drop your city below. If you believe that dignity is not weakness and that the law should belong to everyone who stands in front of it, take a second to like and subscribe. These stories are here to remind us that quiet strength does not need to shout. Sometimes it just stays still and tells the truth until the whole room finally listens. This story is a work of fiction. Imani Booker, Cole Hartman, the Brightwater Hills Police Department, the Ardmore Hotel, and every other name here are invented, and any resemblance to real people, departments, or events is coincidental. The legal framework, though, is real. Pattern or practice investigations, consent decrees, qualified immunity, and Title 18, Section 242 are actual parts of how civil rights are enforced in the United States. I wrote this one because the detail that stayed with me was the bench. Not the handcuffs, not the courtroom. The bench. A person asked to sit down and was told no. That is such a small cruelty, and it is exactly the kind that gets excused 1,000 times before anyone films it. What moves me about Imani is not that she had power the officer didn't see coming. It's that she chose not to use her fear as a weapon and let the truth do the work instead. I think most of us will never be tested that publicly, but all of us get small chances every week to either honor the rules we expect others to follow or quietly bend them when no one's looking. That's the part of the story I can actually carry into my own life. And maybe that's the point.